I never thought I would hear those words from my own daughter. Words sharp enough to cut through 30 years of sacrifice, words that left me feeling like a stranger in her life. But before I tell you what she said, I need to take you back to the moment it all began, the day she came to me with her dream wedding request. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, one of those days I usually cherished. The kind where the sun filters gently through the curtains, dust motes dance in the light, and the world feels calm, at least for a little while. I had spent the morning in the kitchen preparing roast chicken with rosemary and garlic, the same meal Sophie always asked for when she was little. I can still picture her at 8 years old, sitting at this same table, her little legs swinging under the chair as she waited eagerly for dinner. She used to smile so wide her cheeks would puff out, giggling as she stuffed potatoes into her mouth. Back then, she would say things like, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. Strong. Kind." But the young woman who walked into my dining room that Sunday afternoon was nothing like that little girl. Sophie was radiant, but not in the way a daughter glows when she's happy to see her mother. No, her glow came from the expensive makeup, the flawless hair styled in loose waves that cascaded over her shoulders, and the designer dress I knew she hadn't paid for herself. Her fiancé, Daniel, trailed just behind her, his arm draped possessively around her waist. He carried himself with the smug confidence of someone who had never struggled a day in his life. "Hi, Mom," Sophie said, leaning in to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. It was rushed, perfunctory, nothing like the warm embraces she used to give me when she was younger. Daniel simply nodded, his lips curling into a polite but detached smile, as though he were doing me a favor by even being there. We sat down at the table, the smell of roasted chicken filling the room. I tried to make small talk at first, asking how they were, how work was going, if they had any plans for the upcoming week. Daniel's answers were clipped, distracted, as if he had more important things to do. Sophie, however, seemed almost impatient, like she was waiting for me to stop talking so she could get to the real reason they were there. Finally, she placed her napkin delicately on her lap and cleared her throat. "Mom, Daniel and I have some exciting news." Her eyes flickered toward him before returning to me. "We've found the perfect venue for our wedding. It's absolutely breathtaking, a chateau just outside the city. The gardens are magical, and there's even a ballroom with crystal chandeliers. Honestly, it looks like something out of a fairy tale." I smiled, genuinely happy for her in that moment. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Have you set a date?" Her eyes sparkled, but not with joy. It was something else, expectation. "We're thinking late spring, when the flowers are in full bloom. We want everything to be perfect." Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows casually on the table. His tone was smooth, practiced. "Of course, a venue like this comes with certain costs. But really, you only get married once, right? We think it's worth it." Something in his voice made my stomach twist. I had heard that kind of tone before, back when landlords would talk about rent increases, or when bill collectors would leave messages on my answering machine. It was the tone of someone about to ask for money. Sophie leaned closer, her voice soft but filled with anticipation. "It's $80,000, Mom. But just imagine it, the dress, the orchestra, the fireworks, the perfect photos. It's my dream wedding." The fork slipped from my fingers, clattering loudly onto my plate. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. 80,000? Surely she didn't mean that. "Sophie," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you just say $80,000? She nodded eagerly, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. "Yes. But Mom, you have to understand, this isn't just any wedding. This is the biggest day of my life. Every girl deserves her fairytale wedding." Her words echoed in my head, "Every girl deserves." I tried to smile, though I felt the blood drain from my face. "Sweetheart, that's more than I make in 2 years. I can't. I don't have that kind of money." Her lips tightened, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping impatiently against her wine glass. "You don't have to have it, Mom. You can sell the house." The words hit me like a blow. My house. The little cottage I had spent decades dreaming about, the one I finally managed to buy after years of scrubbing hospital floors and working double shifts. That house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was survival. It was safety. It was the first place that was truly mine. It was the place where Sophie had grown up, where she had celebrated birthdays, where she had cried into my arms when her heart was broken. Every corner of that house held a memory, her laughter, her tears, her first steps. And now she wanted me to give it up. For one day. For a party. I looked at her, my throat tight. Sell my house. Sophie, do you even understand what you're asking? Yes, she said firmly, her tone almost dismissive. It makes perfect sense. You don't need this big place anymore. You live here alone. You could easily rent a small apartment and still have money left over. Why hold on to this when you could give me the wedding I deserve? That word again, deserve. I swallowed hard, my chest aching. Sophie, that house is all I have. It's my home, my security. I can't just sell it. The moment the words left my mouth, the room changed. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a chilling tension. Sophie's smile faded, her eyes narrowing into something sharp, something unrecognizable. Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with a smirk, as though he had expected this very answer. He looked at me with a kind of disdain that made my skin crawl, like he was judging me for not playing along. The silence was suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second hammering into me. I felt my heart racing, my palms sweating as I clutched the edge of the table. My daughter, the one person I had always lived for, was staring at me as if I had betrayed her. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of something much, much worse. The silence after my refusal stretched across the table like a heavy fog. I had thought, naively, that Sophie would pause, reconsider, maybe even laugh and say she hadn't meant it seriously. But the look on her face told me otherwise. Her lips curled downward, her eyes narrowing into sharp slits. For a fleeting moment, I thought she might cry, that perhaps she was just overwhelmed by wedding stress. But then her voice cut through the room, cold and sharp as broken glass. You're selfish, she spat. The word hit me harder than a slap. My heart sank, and I blinked, unsure I'd heard her correctly. What? I whispered. You care more about bricks and walls than about me, she continued, her voice rising with each word. You care more about an old house than about your own daughter's happiness. If you don't support me, then you're not part of my life anymore. The room tilted. My ears rang. My chest tightened as if invisible hands were squeezing the breath out of me. Not part of her life. My own daughter, the baby I had carried for 9 long months, the child I had nursed through fevers, the girl I had raised alone after her father walked out on us, was telling me she would cut me out completely. I stared at her, trying to see the Sophie I used to know. The little girl who ran into my arms after school, clutching crayon drawings of hearts and stick figure families. The teenager who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The young woman who once said, "Mom, you're my best friend." But she wasn't there anymore. Sitting across from me was someone else, someone colder, sharper, harder. Daniel shifted in his seat, his smirk widening. He didn't need to say a word. His silence spoke volumes. He was the puppeteer, and Sophie was dancing to his strings. I tried to steady my voice, though it trembled. Sophie, sweetheart, I've given you everything I could. I worked double shifts, nights, weekends, just to put food on the table. I went without so you wouldn't have to. How can you stand there and tell me I don't care about you? Her face twisted with something cruel. She leaned across the table, her eyes burning into mine. Then prove it, Mom. Prove that I mean more to you than some pile of bricks. Sell the house. Pay for the wedding. If you really love me, it shouldn't be that hard. The tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Love doesn't mean destroying myself for one day of celebration, I said quietly. Love doesn't mean giving up the only security I have left. Daniel finally spoke then, his voice slick and poisonous. Sophie, maybe your mother's just too stuck in the past to understand. Some people only care about themselves. Maybe it's time you realize that. Sophie's head snapped toward him, her expression hardening, and then she turned back to me. He's right. You've always been like this. Hoarding your money, clinging to that old house like it's more important than me. I gasped. Hoarding? Sophie, everything I saved, everything I own, It's because I planned for our future. For you. When your father left us, I swore I would never let you go without. I sacrificed everything so you could go to good schools, so you could go to college, so you could have a better life. She sneered. Then give me this. Give me my dream wedding. That's all I'm asking. My throat burned, my hands shaking as I gripped the edge of the table. You're asking me to destroy myself, I whispered. Her chair scraped back suddenly, the sound grating in my ears. She stood, towering over me. Then don't bother coming at all, she snapped. If you won't support me, you're not invited. You're not welcome. Don't expect to be in my life after this. The words landed like blows, each one a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I sat frozen, staring at her, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. My daughter, my only child, was cutting me out as easily as if I were a stranger. Daniel rose to his feet as well, casually slipping an arm around her waist. His expression was smug, victorious, as though he had just won a battle I didn't even realize we were fighting. I opened my mouth to speak, to beg, to reason with her, but nothing came out. My voice was gone. My strength was gone. They left shortly after, the sound of the front door closing behind them echoing through the empty house like a final goodbye. When the silence settled, I sat there at the table, the plates of untouched food growing cold. I stared at the roast chicken, the golden potatoes, the rosemary sprigs, cooked with love, with care, the way I always had. Meals I had made for Sophie since she was a child. And now, it seemed, all of it meant nothing. I don't know how long I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. Time lost all meaning. Eventually, I rose, my legs unsteady, and wandered into the living room. The walls were lined with photo frames, snapshots of a life I thought I had built for us. Sophie's first steps. Her kindergarten graduation. Her high school prom. Her college degree. Her engagement photo with Daniel, both of them smiling as though the future held nothing but promise. I sank into the couch, clutching a photo album to my chest. Memories spilled from the pages. Sophie as a newborn, wrapped in a pink blanket. Sophie at 5, holding up a crooked cake she had tried to bake. Sophie at 16, blowing out birthday candles while her friends cheered. I held the album tightly, my tears staining the pages. How had love turned into this? How had decades of sacrifice transformed into resentment? I thought of all the nights I had stayed awake by her hospital bed when she was sick. The days I went without food so she could have new shoes for school. The years I worked myself to the bone so she could go to college without debt. Every single decision I made for her. And now she was gone. Not physically, she lived just across town. But emotionally, she had cut the cord, severed the bond between us with a single cruel declaration. You're dead to me. My chest ached, the pain so sharp it felt physical. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to have a broken heart. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke, the house was dark and cold. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second a reminder that my world had shifted forever. I whispered into the emptiness, my voice hoarse and trembling. What did I do wrong? Where did I lose her? But no answer came. Just silence. And deep down, I knew the worst was yet to come. The days that followed blurred together like watercolors bleeding into one another, grey, muted, and heavy. I woke each morning with a dull ache in my chest, the memory of Sophie's words pressing against me like a weight I could not lift. You're dead to me. The phrase played on repeat in my mind, looping endlessly, haunting me in my sleep and stalking me through my waking hours. My house, once a place of comfort, felt hollow now. Every corner seemed to whisper of her absence. In the kitchen, the half-empty spice rack reminded me of all the meals I had cooked for her. In the hallway, her old rain boots sat abandoned, too small for years now, yet I could never bring myself to throw them away. Upstairs, her bedroom, still painted in the pale lavender she had chosen as a teenager, stood frozen in time, a shrine to the girl she used to be. I tried to go about my days as if nothing had changed. I watered the plants, folded laundry, made tea in the mornings. But nothing tasted the same. Even tea, once warm and comforting, was bitter now. The neighbors noticed, of course. Mrs. Carter from next door knocked one afternoon, bringing a basket of muffins. "Haven't seen Sophie around lately," she said gently, her eyes curious but kind. I forced a smile, thanking her, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. How could I tell anyone that my own daughter had turned her back on me for the price of a wedding dress and a man's approval? Nights were the hardest. Alone in bed, I stared at the ceiling, wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I been too strict? Too lenient? Had I spoiled her, or not given her enough? The questions gnawed at me, each one sharper than the last. I wanted to believe that Sophie was still inside there somewhere, that the little girl who once whispered "I love you, Mommy" before bed wasn't gone completely. But I didn't know anymore. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, Sophie's. My heart leapt, foolishly hoping for reconciliation. Perhaps she regretted her words. Perhaps she wanted to mend what was broken. With trembling hands, I tore it open. Inside was a wedding invitation. My eyes scanned the card, elegant calligraphy, ivory paper, embossed gold lettering. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Sophie Annabel and Daniel James." And then, at the bottom, the words that shattered me all over again: "This invitation is for formality only. Please respect our wishes and do not attend." The card slipped from my fingers, fluttering to the floor. I sank into a chair, my hands covering my face as sobs tore from my chest. I had lost her. Truly, irrevocably lost her. Days turned into weeks. I stayed away, just as they had demanded. On the day of her wedding, I sat alone in my living room, the curtains drawn tight. Somewhere across town, Sophie was walking down the aisle in a white gown, her hand in Daniel's, her smile radiant for the cameras. And I was not there. I wasn't even allowed to be. I tried not to picture it, but my mind betrayed me, flashes of her as a little girl playing dress-up in my old heels, pretending to be a bride, the way she once said, "When I get married, you'll be standing right beside me, Mom." That promise was gone now, like smoke in the wind. After the wedding, I heard whispers from acquaintances. Sophie had posted photos online, lavish decorations, a towering cake, a string quartet. She looked stunning, radiant, glowing with happiness. There was no sign of me, no mention of me, no acknowledgement that I even existed. It was as though she had erased me from her story entirely. For a while, I let the grief consume me. I stopped answering calls, stopped leaving the house except when absolutely necessary. The walls of my home closed in on me, suffocating and silent. I existed, but I wasn't living. And then, one evening, as I sat staring at the photo album on my lap, something inside me shifted. I flipped through page after page: Sophie's first steps, her birthdays, her graduations. My heart ached, but as I stared at those photos, I realized something profound. Yes, Sophie had turned away from me. Yes, she had chosen a path that cut me out. But those years, those sacrifices, that love, they weren't meaningless. I had given her everything I had. I had loved her fiercely, endlessly, even when it cost me everything. That love didn't disappear just because she rejected it. For the first time in weeks, I stood and walked to the mirror. My reflection startled me, my face drawn, my eyes red-rimmed. But beneath the pain, there was still someone there. Someone who had survived abandonment before. Someone who had raised a child alone, worked 2 jobs, fought tooth and nail to create a life out of nothing. I wasn't worthless. I wasn't just Sophie's mother. I was me. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: strength. The next morning, I brewed tea and opened the curtains. Sunlight spilled across the room, warm and golden. For the first time in months, I let it touch my face. In the days that followed, I began taking small steps. I joined a local book club. I started volunteering at the community center. I went for walks in the park, breathing in the crisp air, watching the seasons change. And slowly, piece by piece, I began to feel alive again. Of course, there were still nights when the ache returned, when I lay awake wondering if Sophie would ever come back to me. But I no longer let those thoughts destroy me. Instead, I whispered a quiet prayer into the dark: may she be happy. May she find her way. And may I have the strength to keep going, no matter what. Months passed. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. This time, it wasn't Sophie's handwriting but Daniel's. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling. Inside was a short note. Mom, I know I don't deserve to call you that anymore. Things with Daniel aren't what I thought they'd be. I made mistakes, horrible mistakes. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I miss you. I need you. Love, Sophie. Tears blurred my vision as I read the words again and again. My heart screamed to run to her, to open my arms, to erase the pain of the past year. But another part of me, the part that had learned to stand on its own again, hesitated. Forgiveness was possible. Love was endless. But trust would take time to rebuild. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the mantel. For now, I would wait. Wait to see if Sophie truly meant those words. Wait to see if she was ready to return not just to my life, but to the bond we once shared. Because I had learned something through all this pain, I could not control Sophie's choices. I could not make her love me the way I loved her. But I could choose myself. I could choose to live, to heal, to reclaim the parts of me I had forgotten. I whispered softly into the quiet room, a promise to myself, I will survive this. And I will not lose myself again. Whatever came next, I would face it with the strength I had always carried inside me. And deep down, I still held on to a fragile hope that one day, the little girl I once knew would find her way back to me. Would you have sold the house for your child's wedding? Comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels.